Okay, so we're moving away from talking about Hitler now to looking at Stalin's foreign policy viewpoint during the later 1930s. From January the 30th, 1933, the world changes for Stalin. Hitler's rise to power is something that is entirely unwelcome as far as Stalin goes. Hitler's pronouncements about Lebensraum, his anti-communism, is something that alarms Stalin, and Stalin had always looked westwards, particularly at Poland, a country he was very suspicious of, and had huge resentments towards since the Polish defeat of the Red Army in 1920, and towards Germany as two of the most likely candidates for an attack on the Soviet Union um, at some point in the 20s and 30s. Stalin looked at Nazi Germany and he saw a dictator who he believed was governed by the forces of capitalism. Stalin didn't take Hitler's racial thinking particularly seriously. Stalin assumed that what fascism actually was, Nazism, was the kind of capitalism's attack dog that could be set on socialism because socialism presented, and particularly socialist states, presented a threat to the workings of the capitalist system. And if this was actually true at all, it certainly isn't true in the case of Nazi Germany, because the Nazi Party and Hitler are not controlled by Germany's kind of capitalist oligarchs. Instead, it's quite the other way around. The party has very much the whip hand over institutions like IG Farben and Krupp Steel. So Stalin is wrong in thinking that he can that this is the means by which Nazism is controlled. This is a fatal assumption because Stalin later assumes that if he finds some way to appeal to German capitalism, then that will hold Hitler off. And this is part of the reason for Stalin's Nazi-Soviet decision to sign the Nazi-Soviet Pact in 1939, in August 1939. But we'll come to that later. Stalin, in the run-up to 1933, had viewed social democrat parties in Europe as a much bigger threat than fascism. He looked at organisations like the German Social Democrat Party and said, see, the reason why they're a threat is because they are the wrong kind of socialism. These are socialist parties that will inevitably wind up propping up the capitalist system. They don't want to overthrow it, they want to reform it, they want to make working conditions nicer for workers, and they're not doing that out of the goodness of their hearts. Instead, they are doing that to help preserve capitalism. So they are, a danger. We don't like them. This is the wrong kind of socialism. The workers of the world might listen to them and not to Moscow. And you forget the idea of revolution once reform appears to be rather more attractive. And Stalin, obsessed with schismatic figures like Trotsky and any other dissenting voice within the socialist world, made sure that Comintern, the international branch of the Communist Party, that Comintern helped to subvert social democrat parties across Europe and drive wedges between social democrats and communists as they came together to resist fascism. So Stalin rather rued the day in 1933 that he had told the communists and the social in Germany to shun the German Social Democrats, because together they might well have been able to create an electoral bloc to keep Hitler out. Stalin was, from 1933 onwards, more and more convinced that a war would come to the Soviet Union in the next decade, and that it would come from the West, and perhaps even from Japan as well, whom he had no trust for either. But principally, the appointment of Hitler as Chancellor in January 1933 is a huge game changer as far as Stalin goes, and ironically, it is one of the things that leads to the purges and mass terror in the Soviet Union.